Nithyanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasyadiraksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Nithyanandam, welcome to Nithyananda Leelas. I'm your host, Ma Nithya Mayatitananda, and my guest today is an old friend from Canada, Sri Nithya Mitrananda, and he's from the French-speaking part of Canada. He's from Quebec, and he and his lovely wife took me under their wing in 2010 when I first came here, and she taught me how to put on a sari, which I will be forever grateful. So I'm so glad you could come on, Mitra. And
thank you.
You've had such a long journey with Swamiji, beginning way back before most of us knew about him in 2007. So I'm going to let you pick your favorite event to talk to the audience about.
It's kind of funny that you say that I've been with Swamiji for such a long time, because I was just telling someone just recently, I was talking to somebody who was in Ujjain in May, just a few months back. And that person went back to Mexico, and one of the Tanedars in Mexico now. And I was telling her, even though it's been only maybe 4 months since we came back, I was telling her it seems like it was 10 years ago because of Varanasi Aye, and then Nithyananda Yoga teacher training, and now the Nithyananda Yogam sessions and everyday satsang, and so many things are going on. And it's like one day with Swamiji seems like a lifetime. But when I look back to when I met Swamiji in 2007, for me, it seems like yesterday. So it's kind of funny how time works.
We can see how he's Kalabarava, Lord of Time.
Yeah. But now if I have to pick out, maybe I'll just pick out few things that just come to me like this, which maybe will inspire a few people watching. Like you said, Ma Mayatita, I'm from the French part of Canada, but back in 2002, when I finished my degree in geology, I'm a geologist by profession, and when I finished my undergrad studies in Montreal in Canada, I said, no more studies, no work, I'm going to surf. And I just took off with my backpack that time, and I didn't know when I was going to come back, and actually I never went back. So I just said, see you, and I left, and I did, fulfill one of my deep desires that I can see now. Somehow I brought this with me. I needed to accomplish something through, spending time surfing on the beaches, and I really enjoyed it in 2002, 2003, and but what I can see is that my whole life became an internal travel, like constantly reinventing myself through different settings, different decisions, but always taking me closer to a deeper truth about our existence. Of course, there were lots of spiritual teachings in the travel days, but when I decided to go back to do a master's degree after a few years traveling and then started to work as a geologist, I decided to go to Vancouver. I had two criteria to go back to do my master's degree. I said I'd like to go to Canada because I knew there were some funding through the government, and I wanted to go to a place where there was ocean and mountains. So where else? Vancouver was the only choice. So I just made one application and I went there. And right when I came in 2004, that was in 2004, before knowing Swamiji, I met my wife, now Ma Mitra. She's from Mexico. That's why we associate with a Spanish-speaking Sangha. So at that point, I don't have a biological tie with Spanish, but I just picked it up along the way. And then when I met Ma Mitra in Vancouver, we spent 2 years of our life as students, and I just cruised through the studies, and I was out, all just on the verge of coming out of university, and Ma Mitra, on the other hand, she started to hit, bumps on the way. Her thesis was getting more challenging. They changed her topic halfway down, so she realized that what she'd done, it wasn't so useful. And then she was put into one area of geology, which she wasn't so used to it, and that was my passion. The volcanoes, studying volcanoes and all the volcanology part of the Earth, history. So that was my thing, but it wasn't hers. So she started to hit, depression. Like she was going down in incompletion, as we would say now. And that was in 2006. And when she was just asking for a solution, and one day she was like praying to, God, the divine, whatever, to send something. And just maybe 2 days later, not even 2 days later, she was walking on the street and she saw on a lamppost, are you depressed? Yes. Do you feel anxious? Yes. Trouble to sleep? Yes. Like all these check. Meditation is for you. And then there was a photo of Swamiji, and that was the group in Vancouver, the Vancouver Sangha, who was getting together every Thursday. And she started to go. She went for the first time, and it was like amazing for her. And so she started to change. And I was in my own little bubble, my own life, and I was normal, so I didn't need any meditation. So that was my feeling at the time. So she basically started going there on Thursdays, and I remember for about a year, probably about a year, she would go to meditation on Thursday, and I would go for football game, and then go out with my friends. So she'd come back home, in a blissful state, and I would also in my own blissful state. That went on for probably a year. And there's one day, I was sitting on our terrace. We lived on a nice apartment facing English Bay. So really nice, and sunsets, amazing. Vancouver is an amazing city. And they were going to walk on the beach with a group of the meditators. And I don't know why that day she asked me, why don't you come for a walk? I think I had been reading and I had been studying a little bit. I was just about to defend my thesis, so that was right around that time. So I said, why not? So then I went out with them and walked for some time on the beach. And in that group there was a man who was also a geologist. His name is Martin William, or also known as Dira in the Sangha. So he was there with them as a geologist. He's basically an explorator going to North Pole, South Pole, leading expeditions to Mount Everest, like all kinds of things that I related to because I was that kind of person. Always in the weekend I couldn't sit still. I had to go to some mountain, do something, jump out of a plane. So when I saw him and I saw that he was with them, I said, how come you are with them? You're normal. Why would you hang out with these guys? And that's when he started to change my whole perception on what it was, the whole spiritual dimension of life, which I was absolutely ignorant to that dimension of life. I was ignorantly poor, but consciously poor in a sense. Maybe it wasn't my time, but the thing is, I had a choice there, and either I could just close myself and do some atheist or whatever, saying that doesn't exist. Because for me, God was more, I related more in terms of nature. As a geologist, you understand the scale of time and space is huge. As before you're taught in the, Christian kind of upbringing, the earth is, you think it's 2,000 years old or maybe a bit more, who knows, after all. But as a geologist, all these beliefs were completely broken down into pieces. You know that there's thousands of millions of years, and I mean, the scale of time and space is humongous. It's not even measurable in our logical mind. So as a geologist, I knew that, you know, all these things. So when he told me about few basic truths about life, and he referred me to a book. In those days, that was the first book I ever picked up from an Indian enlightened being, a yogi. That was the autobiography of a yogi by Paramahamsa Yogananda. And he recommended a few other books too. But that's the first book I picked up. And that really was a turning point for me in life. As I was reading the book, and then I started to buy a bunch of books by Yogananda and just reading. Every time I'd read and I'd like, my God, that's the way I always thought. Like, it was clicking so much. It made so much sense. It seemed like there was no depth to life. And suddenly, like, boom, I had that, you know, maybe in talking about the dimensions, I could only see, you know, maybe a small dimension of breadth and length, but there was no depth to my understanding of life. And then suddenly, the whole thing started to have depth and that feeling and connecting with us as consciousness. And so I mean, it only opened up so many doors, but of course it was not just intellectual. Very soon I started to look into Swamiji's teachings and the techniques. In those days there was a meditation technique that we used to practice on a daily basis. It was called Nithya. Probably some of the people new to the Sangha, they may not know that, but in those days it's the life bliss meditation, which I really recommend to anybody who would like to start the first time a meditation practice, or I could say meditation technique. It's such a powerful technique, and it's right around the time where I started to practice Nithya, more like casually, not so frequently, but at least few times a week. Definitely I'd sit down and, you know, start to experiment with that. And there are a few things which I remember right at that time. Is that one is I was reading about 6 different books on, I was really into the more modern history, like what happened after World War II and the revolutions and Che Guevara and all these things. I stopped reading everything. I've never picked up a book which wasn't from an enlightened being. I could say after Yogananda, Paramahamsa Yogananda, and then after that it was only Swamiji. So, but still, the way Swamiji presents those authentic sacred scriptures, like Agamas and Upanishads and Shiva Sutra, all of that. So I started to, through Swamiji, imbibe all of those scriptures, but I never went back to, I never had the interest to read anything else, because why would you lose time into reading something which is biased history and not even sometimes facts, most of the time not even facts. So what is the point? So then that was one thing which started to happen. I just imbibe and casually practicing the Nithya Dhyan, I started to see many changes. I approached the whole thing as a scientist, because bottom line is I was a scientist. So my mind was very logical. So to me it was easy to say, okay, there's a possibility and there's a technique, so let me play with this and see if it takes me somewhere. So I started to play in this way, being curious about, okay, what will happen. And one of the first major changes, which happened in July 2007, I remember the date was 27th of July 2007. I was casually doing the Nithya Dhyan, and right after the technique, I opened my eyes, and the first thought that came to me is, why am I drinking? You know, in the social pressure, which is the case. I mean, in students' life and colleagues in at the job or anywhere, it seems like alcohol is such a deep conditioning right from the age where you're legally in age to drink. And when you start to pick up that habit, it's such a big social conditioning. Like you go out for a drink. Nowadays, people go out for coffee, which is also, again, another conditioning. But whether it's a drink, whether it's a coffee, you don't realize that you're actually not even connecting with people you're sitting with at the table. You're only like pretending to be there and somehow keep drinking and drinking. And then suddenly you don't even understand what you're talking. So it's nonsense, but it's like being completely asleep there, deeply asleep, and you destroying your body through that habit. And the social drinking became a bit too heavy. Like as I started to work in Central America, working on mining camps for 30 days straight, or sometimes up to 50 days straight. So the only thing is like, well, you finish job and have few beers, and a few times a week, like way many 2 beers. So then that became a habit, and Nithya Dhyan, I don't know how it happened, but it was just in that moment, I didn't leave alcohol. Alcohol left me. The whole thing dissolved from my bio-memory, and even from the muscle memory. In that instant, I hadn't even met Swamiji. And just casually doing the technique, the habit of drinking, not only the habit, the very desire, the thought of having alcohol into this body was completely removed. Until this date, it's been almost 10 years, 9 years. Not only I haven't had a drop of alcohol, not even a drop, I haven't even had a thought, should I have a drink? Like not even once. If I would have...
You're going to put all these rehab programs out of business to know it's that easy. As Swamiji said, we're addicted to the thought pattern, not the physical act. And you're saying the thought pattern just vanished.
It just vanished. But now I tell you the second part of that happening. In that moment, I was sure that alcohol had left me. I had no doubt inside me. But I had to be integrated and authentic to that decision, because then I go back to the same workers, to the same colleagues, to the same circles of friends. That was the same. My decision was firm inside. So I told myself, if I tell my mind, myself, okay, I'm never going to drink again, I knew that somehow my mind wasn't going to believe it. Because I told that like probably 1,000 times, I'm never drinking again, and like 3 days later, that was it. So I said, okay, let me set up a tangible goal. So that was in July. I said, I'm not going to touch a drink till Christmas time. That was like, I don't know why, but we calculate the year based on, everything happens towards the holiday seasons. Then the drinking picks up even more. So I said, no, till the end of the year. Till the end of the year, I'm not drinking anything. And it was really, I can say, a proof of my strength, my inner strength to hold on to that decision, because then people started to pick on me, like my friends, like, come on, what is this? Like, and they start to call you all sorts of names, and like, come on, you're not going to last a week, you're not going to last 2 weeks. But then, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months went by, and I was adamant. I wasn't moving from my decision. And so I went, and I broke all those barriers of social conditioning, and of course, I can tell, like, I realized how fake our social identity is, because all my friends, they just they just left my life, because I realized, even if I think I accepted few invitations, okay, I'll join you guys, but I'm not going to drink. I realized I had nothing to share. I had nothing to say. And even then I started to be filled with so much like of that spiritual enthusiasm to know more about like the truth of this of consciousness, of the universe, of myself, of what I'm doing here, and so many things. And these guys were still in the, you know, I can't even say what they're talking about.
Well, and Swamiji says you can't help someone who has chosen not to wake up. It's
Of
one thing if
course.
someone's asleep, but if someone has chosen not to wake up, you've got to just leave them alone.
It's a different frequency. It's like you change a station, you know, suddenly you're not even speaking the same language. It's like, what? What are you saying? So slowly it's like, okay, they went on to their path, and I suddenly went on to my path. Fortunately, that is exactly where the Sangha is your best friend. Because now you're starting to tune into a frequency where you find that, wow, there's thousands of people in that same frequency. And those are friends who actually, you know, you talk about what Swamiji speaks of in the satsang, and then you speak about everything that we speak in the Sangha, of course. But it becomes such a beautiful, loving environment where you're allowed to continue to flower and expand and expand and expand. So that was the transition. I can say that part of the main transition in my life where I completely, what Swamiji says, you know, U-turn now, you know, put the brake. And, you know, for me, at that time, it may not have been inner awakening per se, but that was part of my inner awakening. There was no inner awakening in those days. I did inner awakening, second inner awakening in July 2009. Of course, I can go on. That's just a small part of the Leela of the story. But I can see how Swamiji entered so strongly into my life from then. And right at that time in October 2007, that was the first time I met Swamiji physically. It was in those days that what we call now the Nitya Kriya Yoga. And I did that weekend program in Orlando, in Florida, USA, in October. I think it was the 10th of October of 2007. And it was such an intimate group, less than 50 people for sure, maybe 40, 50 people at most. And I could just remember by the end of the 2 days, I was dancing, bubbling with joy and excitement. For the first time, I was just dancing with no reason, without having, you know, before I needed at least 3-4 beers before I could get on some dance floor. This was just blissful dancing out of the joy of being there around Swamiji. And that was it. I mean, then I think the love of the Master entered into me. And I just want to share that because I know that it's 20 few minutes speaking. So Swamiji, I didn't spoken on the 4 powers and, you know, integrity, authenticity, responsibility and enriching in those days, not yet. But because it's the very foundation of life, as Swamiji is revealing now in the matrix of reality that he's talking about right now. There's one thing that strikes me about what he's been sharing with the Nithyananda Yogam participants. He's saying across all the worlds, take it any dimension, all the planes of existence, there's a spindle, something that makes everything revolve around those principles. And it's exactly the 4 powers. At any level of existence, everything revolves around those 4 powers. And one of them is the responsibility. And the only factor that allows you to expand and, you know, grow in your experience of this universe is taking responsibility for where you are. You know, Swamiji said, when you start taking responsibility in your dream state, you start to interact in your dream. And then you start to be more and more conscious about your waking state and taking more and more responsibility in that state. The more you take responsibility in that state, then you're allowed to jump into another sphere of existence or plane of existence where, you know, you become more and more expanded and responsible for where you are. And right at that time, after that weekend program, I was sitting in Vancouver, and I still remember the thought. I was sitting It was early morning. I was having my breakfast, bowl of cereal, and I thought, whatever Swamiji is doing, let me take responsibility also for what he's doing. That was the thought that kind of made that shift happen in me, and I started to be more and more interested in doing, volunteering around the center in Vancouver, and I thought that I would go to India in 2012 because after all, the world was going to end, so perfect time to go to India and finish it. And before I knew it, not even 6 months down the line, we were here with Ma Mitra. We were in the Himalaya Yatra, going around the different sacred.
So that was right up your alley, the mountains. He
Yeah,
clicked.
yeah. When we knew the Himalaya Yatra was happening, then we said, okay, come on, let's go. And we came here for the Nithyananda 10-day program. I'm not going to go into it because now it's going to stretch too much. I think for us.
We'll get you on another time as well.
But what I want to say is, like, it was such a turning point where I met Swamiji and things started to speed up so fast. And even though it's been, yes, almost 10 years of my life, it's almost like time becomes irrelevant. I can even say it seems like it was yesterday. At the same time, it could have been centuries. In terms of the evolution of mind, definitely it sped up the process speeded up by, I don't even know. I can't even imagine.
Well, I think the amazing thing about Swamiji landing is he has attracted scientists. My degree is in science as well, and the way he presents things is perfect for our minds because it's got the science behind it and it's provable. And I know it's given me what I couldn't find in my degree. I thought that all my answers would come from getting a degree, and they didn't. It just made it worse. So the fact that he can present in a way that any scientist can sit down and go, this is truth. I've experienced it myself. And you had mentioned something early on, and I'll just let everybody know, Swamiji has a second website. The main one is nithyananda.org. But there's a second one called meditationinsforyou.org. And the Nithya meditation that Sri Mitra mentioned is the exact one that hooked me as well. I was sitting in Canada I had met Dira as well, Martin Williams, and I started doing that meditation and my whole world changed. Like the energy it landed on me just from doing that one little practice was astonishing. So I encourage you all to try it. It's free. You just go to meditationinsforyou.org, and there's a lot of meditations, but Nithya Dhyan is the one.
Life bliss meditation works great on addictions, any of these, especially muscle memory patterns. I think it's like acid wash. So really, it's
well, and I know we're getting our signal. But I gave the Nithya Dhyan meditation CD to a woman who was letting me use her cafe for our meditation group. And she had given it to the caregiver of her husband. Her husband was bedridden with multiple sclerosis. And every day he would lay there. So he didn't even really do the steps. He would just lay there and listen to it. And it ended with Swamiji chanting Sanskrit, the Guru Puja. And she said one Sunday they were in bed together and he just got out of bed and walked into the bathroom and had a shower, and he hadn't been able to do that for 3 years. And when he came back to the room, he's like, what's wrong with you? And she goes, what are you doing? He said, I had a shower. And she says, you don't know how to do that. And he goes, oh, I guess I don't. But it wiped out that thought pattern that he was crippled. So with that happy note, we'll end with the Purna mantra.
Thank you, Ma.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sarvam Satguru Paduka Paramastu Om Nithyanandam.
Nithyanandam. Thank you.
Thank you.